The morning everything changed, I was wearing my grandmother's pearls and a dark blue dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Not that anyone in Davidson and Mitchell Law noticed. To them, I was just Sophia Barrett, the efficient but unremarkable executive secretary who'd been managing their office for the past 8 years. If they'd bothered to look closer, they might have wondered why someone with an MBA from Wharton and a real estate empire worth 9 figures was just anything. But people see what they expect to see, and Jeffrey Davidson had always expected to see nothing more than a secretary. I straightened papers on my desk, solid mahogany that had been here longer than most of the junior partners, and reviewed the morning schedule. Board meeting at 9:00 a.m., where they'd be discussing the firm's expansion plans. Plans I'd helped craft, though my name appeared nowhere on the proposals. "Coffee, Sophia," Jeffrey called as he swept past my desk, our manna suit perfectly pressed, ego perfectly inflated. "The good stuff, not that break room garbage. And make sure the Harrison files are ready for the meeting." I smiled politely. "Of course, Mr. Davidson." I'd already prepared both, along with a detailed analysis of their latest acquisition target. Analysis that would somehow become Jeffrey's brilliant insight by the end of the meeting. What Jeffrey didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd spent the last 3 years quietly buying up the commercial real estate around their precious law firm. Building by building, through various shell companies and investment trusts, I'd assembled a portfolio that included not just their office tower, but half the prime properties in downtown Seattle. The previous building owner, old Mr. Matthews, had been looking for a quiet sale. Someone who maintained the property's integrity rather than flip it for quick profit. We closed the deal over dinner at my penthouse last week, sharing stories about how many people underestimated us both. Ms. Barrett, Andrea, one of the young paralegals, appeared at my desk looking nervous. The promotion committee wanted me to deliver this. She handed me an envelope, her expression sympathetic. I already knew what it contained. I'd seen the committee's notes, heard their dismissive comments. Just a secretary, they'd said. Competent but not partner material. Inside was a form letter, thanking me for my interest in the junior partner position, but regretfully informing me that they'd chosen to go in another direction. That direction, I knew, was Bradley Thompson III, fresh out of law school with mediocre grades but excellent family connections. "Thank you, Andrea," I said, tucking the letter into my desk drawer. She lingered, clearly wanting to say more. "It's not fair," she finally burst out. "You basically run this place. Everyone knows it." I met her eyes, seeing in them the same fire I'd had at her age. "Life rarely is fair, Andrea, but it is interesting." The board meeting started precisely at 9:00 a.m. I sat in my usual corner, taking notes while the partners discussed their grand plans for expansion. They needed another floor, they decided. The firm was growing, and their current space wouldn't suffice. Jeffrey leaned back in his chair, confident as always. "I'll talk to building management, see if we can negotiate something reasonable." I made a note in my leather-bound notebook, my handwriting precise and unhurried. In 3 days, they'd learned that building management had changed, that their lease, up for renewal next month, was now under new ownership. The meeting continued, partners pontificating about market dominance and growth strategies. I recorded it all, adding my own observations in a simple cipher I developed years ago. Knowledge, after all, was power. And I had 8 years of knowledge about every deal, every client, every secret that passed through these walls. At lunch, Jeffrey called me into his office. The rejection letter sat on his desk. "Sophia," he said, not bothering to look up from his phone. "About your application, I trust you understand our decision." I stood quietly, hands clasped in front of me. "Of course, Mr. Davidson. It's nothing personal. You're excellent at what you do. Invaluable, really. But partner? That's not really your place." I watched him, this man who thought he held all the cards, who believed his position at the top was unassailable. "And what exactly is my place, Mr. Davidson?" He looked up then, irritation flickering across his features. "Don't be difficult, Sophia. You're a secretary, a very good one, but still just a secretary. Know your place and stay in it." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with condescension. I smiled, the same pleasant, professional smile I'd worn for 8 years. "Thank you for the clarity, Mr. Davidson. Will there be anything else?" He waved me away, already forgetting our conversation. I returned to my desk and opened my private email. 3 messages waited. One from my property management company, one from my investment advisor, and one from Mr. Matthews confirming the final transfer of ownership. I responded to each one, my fingers flying over the keyboard with practiced efficiency. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, they'd learn what happened when you underestimated the wrong person. That evening, as the office emptied, I stayed late as usual. But instead of managing the firm's paperwork, I prepared for my own transformation. I reviewed the new lease terms I had drawn up, significantly higher than the current rate but still just below market value. Just enough to hurt without being legally actionable. I also prepared letters to each of the firm's top clients whose relationships I'd quietly nurtured over the years. Letters explaining my departure and my new venture, a boutique legal consulting firm specializing in the exact type of work Davidson and Mitchell handled. Andrea stopped by my desk on her way out. "Don't let them get to you," she said softly. "You're worth 10 of them." I looked up at her, this bright young woman with dreams bigger than her current position. "Andrea, would you be interested in joining me for coffee tomorrow morning? I have a proposition you might find interesting." She brightened. "Really?" "Yes, absolutely." "Excellent. And Andrea, don't mention this to anyone else." "Not yet." After she left, I walked to the window and looked out over the Seattle skyline. 8 years I'd played this role, building my empire in secret while they dismissed me as just a secretary. Tomorrow, they'd learn that sometimes the real power isn't in a corner office. It's at the desk right outside it. I gathered my things, including the small brass nameplate that had sat on my desk all these years. I wouldn't need it anymore. Tomorrow, I'd have a new nameplate on a new door in my building. As I walked out, Jeffrey was still in his office, probably working on the expansion proposal. He didn't look up as I passed. He never did. "Good night, Mr. Davidson," I called out, my voice perfectly pleasant. "Night, Sophia," he replied absently, not knowing it was the last time he casually dismissed me. Tomorrow would change everything, and I couldn't wait to see his face when he realized just how badly he'd underestimated his just a secretary. I arrived at La Maison Café at precisely 7:30 am, early enough to secure the corner table with the view of Davidson and Mitchell's building, my building. Andrea was already waiting, nervously stirring her cappuccino. "Thanks for meeting me," I said, setting down my Hermes bag, a quiet indulgence I'd always downplayed at the office. "I trust you haven't mentioned this to anyone?" She shook her head. "No, but something's happening, isn't it? You seem different today." I smiled, pulling out a folder embossed with a new logo. Barrett Strategic Consulting. "How would you like to be my first employee? Starting salary twice what you're making now, plus equity in the company." Her eyes widened as she looked at the contract. "But how? I mean, yesterday you were just a secretary." I finished for her, amused. "Andrea, that's lesson 1. Never be what others expect you to be." While they were busy underestimating me, I built something of my own. Just then, my phone buzzed. A message from my property management company, new lease terms delivered to Davidson and Mitchell. Meeting requested immediately. Perfect timing. I looked back at Andrea. "You don't have to decide right now, but I get to the office early today. It's going to be interesting." By 8:45 am, chaos had erupted at Davidson and Mitchell. I walked through the lobby, my lobby, to find Jeffrey Davidson in a heated argument with the building's management representative. "This is impossible," he was saying, waving papers in the air. "The rent can't just double overnight. Who the hell is this new owner?" I passed by silently, taking my usual place at my desk. For now, the morning board meeting had been hastily rescheduled to address the rental crisis. I sat in my corner, notebook ready, watching the partners file in. Their faces were tight with worry, their usual confidence replaced by confusion and fear. "This is outrageous," Jeffrey began, standing at the head of the table. "Some mystery buyer has acquired the building and is trying to force us out with these ridiculous terms. We need options, people." "We could look at other properties," Bradley Thompson Ayala suggested, shooting a smug glance my way. He'd been particularly pleased about getting the promotion over me. "In this market," another partner scoffed, "everything comparable is either occupied or even more expensive. Plus, moving would cost a fortune." "What about legal action?" Jeffrey demanded. "There must be something." Actually, I said quietly, speaking up for the first time in 8 years of board meetings. The new terms are completely legal. I made sure of that. The room fell silent. Every head turned toward me. You, what? Jeffrey asked, his face reddening. I stood smoothing my designer dress. No more hiding my success in modest outfits. The new owner reviewed all options carefully before setting the new terms. Everything is well within market rates and legal parameters. How would you know that? Bradley sneered. I smiled, reaching into my bag for a stack of documents. Because, Mr. Thompson, I am the new owner, not just of this building, but of the entire block, and several others downtown. The silence that followed was absolute. I could almost hear their minds racing, re-evaluating every interaction, every dismissive comment, every time they called me just a secretary. That's impossible, Jeffrey sputtered. You're a secretary? No, Mr. Davidson. I was pretending to be a secretary while building my real estate empire. There's a difference. I began distributing the documents. These are your options. Option 1. Accept the new lease terms, effective immediately. Option 2. Vacate the premises within 60 days as per the original lease agreement. Bradley jumped up. This is blackmail. This is business, I corrected him. The same business you claimed I wasn't qualified to participate in when you denied my partnership application. One of the senior partners, Elizabeth Chen, had been studying me with newfound respect. How long? She asked quietly. How long have you owned? 3 years for my first building, I replied. This one officially became mine last week. Perfect timing, wouldn't you say? Jeffrey had collapsed into his chair, his face ashen. Why? He managed. Why work as a secretary if you owned? Knowledge is power, Mr. Davidson. You taught me that, though not in the way you intended. Every client meeting, every deal, every secret that passed through this office, I learned from all of it, built on it. While you were busy looking down on me, I was looking at the bigger picture. I walked to the window, my window now, and gazed out at the city skyline. By the way, I'm resigning, effective immediately, though I suspect you figured that out. You can't do this, Jeffrey said, but his voice had lost its usual authority. We'll fight it. I turned back to face them. You can try, but consider this. I know every weakness in this firm, every ethical gray area, every questionable decision, every client you've overcharged or underserved. I've documented it all. I padded my notebook. 8 years of notes, gentlemen. Care to test how detailed they are? The threat hung in the air, unspoken but clear. They could fight me, but they wouldn't win. Elizabeth Chen stood up. I'd like to speak with Ms. Barrett privately, she announced, and I suggest the rest of you start seriously considering those options she presented. As the others filed out, looking shell-shocked, Andrea appeared at the door. She was carrying a box of her belongings. I quit, she announced, grinning. I'm accepting that job offer, Ms. Barrett, if it's still open. It absolutely is, I replied. And please call me Sophia. The rest of that morning passed in a blur of activity. Word spread quickly through the office. The quiet secretary, who'd been invisible for so long, was suddenly the most powerful person in the building, literally. By lunch, 3 more employees had resigned to join my new venture. By afternoon, 2 of Davidson and Mitchell's biggest clients had requested meetings with me. I sat in my old desk one last time, watching Jeffrey pace in his office, making frantic phone calls. He tried calling his own real estate contacts, only to discover I owned most of the suitable properties in the area. He tried threatening legal action, only to have his own attorneys remind him of how much I knew about the firm's operations. He even tried appealing to my sympathy, sending Elizabeth to negotiate. But I'd spent 8 years being sympathetic. Now it was time for something else. As the day drew to a close, I stood to leave. Jeffrey stepped out of his office, looking somehow older than he had that morning. Sophia, he called out, his voice strained. Please, let's discuss this reasonably. I paused, turning to face him. Reasonable? Like how you reasonably explained that I should know my place. He flinched. I was wrong. Obviously, I was wrong about you. We can fix this, make you a partner, give you whatever position you want. Oh, Mr. Davidson, I said softly, you still don't understand. I don't want a position in your firm. I want your firm to be a tenant in my building, and now it is. I picked up my bag and headed for the elevator. Behind me, I heard him call out one last time. What happens now? I stepped into the elevator, turning to face him. Now you learn what it feels like to not be in control. The new lease terms are due signed by tomorrow at noon. Don't be late. I hear the new owner is quite strict about deadlines. The doors closed on his stunned face, and I smiled. The day wasn't over yet. I had a dinner meeting with Elizabeth Chen, who had expressed interest in joining my new venture, and tomorrow, the real changes would begin. 1 month after my resignation from Davidson and Mitchell, I sat in my new office on the top floor of the Barrett Tower, formerly known as the Matthews Building. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Seattle's skyline, including the 6 other properties I owned in the downtown core. Andrea knocked and entered, tablet in hand. The Davidson and Mitchell partners are here for the lease negotiation. Should I make them wait? I glanced at the antique clock on my wall. A piece I bought at auction years ago, but kept in storage until now. They were 7 minutes early, desperately trying to show good faith. Give them 5 minutes, I replied, adjusting my channel jacket. Let them remember how it feels to wait outside someone else's office. My new headquarters occupied the entire top floor, designed with the quiet elegance I'd always appreciated but never flaunted. The reception area featured original artwork from local artists I'd been supporting anonymously for years. The conference room showcased views of Elliott Bay. Everything spoke of old money and established power, the kind of power that didn't need to shout to be heard. When I finally allowed them in, Jeffrey Davidson looked like he aged years and weeks. Bradley Thompson II had lost his smug smile, and the other partners filed in with the wary respect of people who'd learned a harsh lesson about underestimating others. "Thank you for coming," I said, not rising from my desk. "Please take a seat." They arranged themselves around the conference table, the same one I'd sat beside for 8 years, taking notes while they ignored my presence. I bought it in the liquidation sale when Davidson and Mitchell downsized to half their former space, unable to afford the new rent. "Ms. Barrett," Jeffrey began, his voice carefully neutral, "we've reviewed your latest proposal. And it's aggressive. But we're prepared to accept the terms with some modifications." I opened the leather portfolio in front of me, my grandmother's, the same one I used as their secretary. "Modifications? Like the ones you suggested to the Harrison contract last year? The ones that walked the line of legal malpractice?" They shifted uncomfortably. Elizabeth Chen, who had indeed joined my new venture as lead counsel, smiled slightly from her seat beside me. "That's not relevant to these negotiations," Bradley interjected, trying to sound authoritative. "Everything is relevant, Mr. Thompson. That's something you learn when you pay attention instead of relying on family connections." I let that sink in before continuing. "But you're right. Let's focus on the present." I pressed a button on my desk, and a screen descended from the ceiling. "These are your current financials. Notice the pattern. Client retention down 40%, revenue dropped 35% last quarter, and 3 more partners are considering departure." "How did you get this information?" Jeffrey demanded. I smiled. "The same way I got everything else, by being invisible while you were being careless. But that's not important right now. What's important is your future, or rather, if you'll have one." Elizabeth handed each of them a new document. "This is our final offer. The rent stays as is, but we're willing to offer a longer-term lease, with conditions." They read in silence, faces growing paler with each page. "This is impossible," Jeffrey finally said. "You want a controlling interest in Davidson and Mitchell?" "Not want, Mr. Davidson. Have. Check the fine print of your partnership agreement, the one I helped draft 8 years ago. Your firm's debt ratio now exceeds the stability threshold. As your primary creditor, through various holdings, I can exercise the conversion option." The room erupted in chaos. Partners talking over each other, papers being shuffled, faces reddening with anger and fear. I let them vent for exactly 1 minute before raising my hand. The silence that followed was immediate. They'd learned at least that much. "Gentlemen, let me be clear. Your firm is failing. Not because I raised the rent, but because you never understood what made you successful in the first place. It wasn't your name on the door or your expensive suits. It was the people you overlooked, the ones who actually did the work while you took the credit." I stood walking to the window. "I'm offering you a chance to survive, to become part of something bigger. Barrett Strategic Holdings isn't just a real estate company. We're redefining how business is done in this city. By taking over your former employers? Bradley asked bitterly. No, Mr. Thompson. By recognizing talent wherever it exists. By building something that values substance over status. I turned back to face them. Elizabeth left your firm to join me. So did Andrea, and 17 other employees. Want to know why? None of them spoke. Because I saw them. All those years while you were ignoring us, we were building relationships, supporting each other, creating a network that now spans every major company in Seattle. My phone buzzed. A message from my property management team. 3 more tenants had signed with us, fleeing Davidson and Mitchell's sinking ship. You have 24 hours to decide, I continued. Join us, under new leadership and new principles, or find new offices outside the city center. I hear there's space available in Tacoma. Jeffrey stood slowly, his shoulders slumped. You planned this all along, didn't you? Every detail. No, Mr. Davidson, you planned it. Every time you called me just a secretary. Every time you took credit for my work. Every time you reminded me to know my place. You taught me exactly what kind of leader not to be. After they left, Elizabeth stayed behind. That was impressive, she said. But why give them any chance at all? Why not just let them fail? I sat back down, touching my grandmother's pearls. Because success isn't about destruction. It's about transformation. They'll either learn to adapt or they'll disappear. Either way, the landscape of power in this city has already changed. The next day, news broke of the acquisition. Barrett Strategic Holdings acquires Davidson and Mitchell in historic deal, read the headlines. The business world buzzed with speculation about the mysterious woman who'd built an empire right under everyone's noses. Reporters called, wanting to know how a simple secretary had orchestrated such a takeover. I declined all interviews, letting the results speak for themselves. 1 week later, I called a company-wide meeting. The old Davidson and Mitchell staff, now Barrett Strategic employees, filled the auditorium. Jeffrey and the former partners sat in the back row, their new positions still uncertain. Some of you knew me as a secretary, I began. Others as your landlord. Now you know me as your CEO. But titles aren't what matter here. What matters is vision, dedication, and the courage to be more than what others expect of you. I gestured to Andrea, now my chief of operations, and Elizabeth, my general counsel. Look around. The people you once overlooked are now your leaders, not because of their names or their connections, but because of their talent and their integrity. In the following months, Barrett Strategic Holdings transformed Seattle's business landscape. We acquired 3 more firms, renovated 5 buildings, and launched a foundation supporting women entrepreneurs. Jeffrey Davidson eventually retired, unable to adapt to his new role. Bradley Thompson II left for a smaller firm in Tacoma. But others, those who learned to see beyond their prejudices, found new success under our leadership. 1 year after my resignation, I sat in my office reviewing applications for our new mentorship program. A knock at the door revealed Paul, my old security guard from Davidson and Mitchell, now head of building security for all Barrett properties. Ms. Barrett, he said with a smile, your next appointment is here. Another former secretary looking to invest in real estate. I smiled back, remembering my own journey. Send her in, Paul, and remember what I always say. He finished the sentence with me. There's no such thing as just a secretary. The woman who entered looked nervous but determined, clutching a folder of property analysis. I recognized that look. I'd worn it myself, once upon a time. Welcome, I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. Tell me, what's your vision? Because that's what Barrett Strategic had become, not just a company, but a movement. A reminder that power doesn't always look like you expect it to, and that sometimes the most important person in the room is the one everyone else ignores. As I listened to her pitch, I touched my grandmother's pearls and smiled. The view from the top was spectacular, but the real satisfaction wasn't in the height of my success. It was in changing the way people reached for it. The morning everything changed, I was wearing my grandmother's pearls and a dark blue dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Not that anyone in Davidson and Mitchell Law noticed. To them, I was just Sophia Barrett, the efficient but unremarkable executive secretary who'd been managing their office for the past 8 years. If they'd bothered to look closer, they might have wondered why someone with an MBA from Wharton and a real estate empire worth 9 figures was just anything. but people see what they expect to see, and Jeffrey Davidson had always expected to see nothing more than a secretary.